Welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast. More chaotic than a Ducati contract meeting, more valuable than an Aprilia factory deal, and more reliable than a doddery Italian rider manager. I'm Adam Wheeler, with the hair and the heart rate of Davide Tardozzi, and I'm joined by two dream teamers in David Emmett and Neil Morrison. Hello, fellas. We're struggling a little bit for talking points on today's podcast. How about the weather? Our plans for the break in this season, or maybe crap circuit nicknames? Dave, any thoughts?
I thought I'd come on here and talk about the visit to Sissinghurst, the lovely garden in Kent, where I intend to go visit with my wife in the next week. So yes, looking forward to that, and also going to visit my friend and colleague Zara, who writes my MotoGP race reports. We're going to go to Kew Garden, so I'm really looking forward to that. So I thought we'd just fill the space with just gardening chat.
Yes, and talking about orchids and various petal kind of formations or something, right? Maybe we could do that.
Well, definitely. You should. I don't know whether I should bring up the origin of orchid, but anyway, don't Google it. It's filthy.
Neil,
this is a genuine fact, by the way. This is a genuine fact.
Neil, has the keyboard been on fire?
Yes, it has died. Yeah. But glad to say that the schedule is kind of gradually decreasing in intensity now, which is lovely. These back-to-backs are always a fun time, and then with a Monday like the one that we just had, even more so.
Okay, in all seriousness, we're going to dissect the Post-Mugello swaparounds. Jorge Martin leaving a championship-winning bike and brand for Aprilia. Marc Marquez finally entering the Lion's Den for 2 years, has just been confirmed as we're recording. Enea Bastianini is supposedly heading to Orange, and basically where that leaves everybody else. We've got a couple of snippets of Aprilia Racing CEO Massimo Rivola after his talk with us at the end of the Mugello test on Monday. Before we jump in, massive thanks to Renthal. Head to renthal.com and see what treats and accessories you can find to upgrade your street bike. Also to KTM. The KTM 990 Duke is a brand new motorcycle for 2024 that was unveiled recently. Loads of torque, awesome and agile handling, and unforgettable style. The bike isn't a modified 890, it's fresh from the ground up, built in Austria, and is already proving to be something of a mid-class master. We cannot wait to test one. Also, a reminder that the Paddock Pass podcast is the only MotoGP show with boots on the ground at every Grand Prix and most non-racing events. And for that, we have a special Patreon channel that we load with daily note shows at each round, plus other content. Steve is busy at the TT this week, so there's plenty to jump into. We also activate a Discord server. What's Discord, I hear you think? It's a community chat board where we can answer messages and try to react to banter through MotoGP weekends and whenever we can check in. The community is growing and it's good fun. Dave, you've been hammering the Discord recently.
That sounds, again, like a most appalling euphemism. But I have been extremely active on Discord. It's good fun. Intelligent chat, intelligent question, some funny banter, and some good questions. So it's nice to have a safe space to be chatting all things MotoGP.
And Neil, when it comes to Discord, one of the particular channels seems to be the MotoGP fantasy element, and you just kind of drop in little bombs and then escaping, just about how good you are.
Yeah, exactly. With the proviso that 960th. You can sort of pick our brains and also let us know how stupid we are and how stupid some of the things that we said are. So yeah, fully recommend getting on there.
Enough housekeeping. Let's tackle the Jorge Martin news first. He's the World Championship leader, after all. Dave, give us some context, because this leapt up at us while we were counting the minutes at a rain wreck test at Mugello. It was something of a surprise, right, on Monday?
It was a surprise. At 5:30, we had a little bit of a tease that something was about to happen. And then at 6 o'clock, the bombshell dropped. And it was a proper bombshell, really, because it was the decisive move in which everything else shakes out. And honestly, props to Aprilia to stealing Ducati's thunder, because the biggest news, the biggest story in MotoGP right now should be Marc Marquez to factory Ducati, but Aprilia have sucked all the air out of the room, and it's gone off a bit of a damp squib, really. What appears to have happened, we thought, or we were told that certainly there were reports on Thursday from very credible journalists that Ducati had chosen Martin to be Pecco Bagnaia's partner for 2025 and 2026, but something appears to have happened over the weekend. Obviously, Ducati thought, well, we'll put Martin in the factory team. Well, what a lot of us thought, put Martin in the factory team, put Marc in Pramac, and away we go. It should be fine. It'll all be perfect. Only they sort of forgot that Marc Marquez might have a say in all of this, and he said, don't really want to go to Pramac, thank you very much. And Pramac have the right to the factory bikes, so that sort of really ruined it for them as well. Made it very difficult for Ducati, and it seems that sort of offers were made to Martin that he was not interested in having, and in the end, Ducati chose. When the crunch came, it came down to Marc versus Martin, and they chose Marc. And Martin very sensibly drew his own conclusions and said, what more do I have to do, for God's sake? And left.
My question to both of you to kick off this section of the podcast is it a good move for both parties? I mean, undoubtedly, Jorge Martin has improved, you would imagine, his salary. I mean, say, let's put a number out of the sky. Say he was earning 2.5 at Pramac. As a Ducati rider at Pramac, you'd have to imagine he's on a much bigger wedge as a number one rider for another rival manufacturer. But Neil, coming to you first, I mean, what's sort of your thoughts? Is it a good move for both parties?
It's a good move for Aprilia, absolutely. They've pretty much got the best possible rider that I think they possibly could have, with the exception of Marc Marquez, but we never really heard of Marc being linked to Aprilia. So yes, they're getting the rider that's leading the championship this year. They're getting one of the most talented riders on the grid, one of the fastest riders. You speak to people within Pramac Ducati and they say that Martin has created one of the best ambiences that a lot of those technicians have worked in. So you're also getting a guy that knows how to sort of build a team dynamic, build a team ethic. And yeah, I mean, you just have to look at the championship to realize what a good deal it is. It's the first time I think that Aprilia have had a rider that has fought for the MotoGP championship within their MotoGP team. I know they've had Andrea Iannone, who's won races before going to Aprilia. They've had Maverick Vinales, that's won MotoGP races before going to Aprilia. But both riders were very flawed, and we're never really going to be full MotoGP championship contenders or animals. Whereas I think Martin most certainly is. You just have to look at last year and this year. From Martin's point of view, it is a risky move. There's no doubt about that, because he's leaving the bike and leaving the factory that finished first, second, third, and fourth in Sunday's Italian Grand Prix. The manufacturer that has won 6 out of the 7 races so far this year, that continues to lead the way and be the benchmark in the class, for a factory that is definitely on the up, has potential, but sort of the bare facts are that have never really been more than a sort of win a couple of races every year kind of factory. But I guess Martin will take great motivation in trying to bring that up a level. And you could say that this is maybe the final piece. We've sort of been wondering for the last couple of years just how good is the RSGP Aprilia, because let's face it, Aleix Espargaro and Maverick Vinales, excellent riders, but not riders that have consistently been there at the front ever in their career, and now they're bringing someone that has been there at the front for the past 2 season and a half. So brilliant for Aprilia, risky for Martin, I would say, but then I would also add Martin didn't really have any other option. I mean, he's been saying all year that it's either the Ducati factory or I'm leaving. And when it was becoming apparent to him over the weekend that they were having second thoughts about I think, what we hear or what we've been told is that they told him after Barcelona, that second factory seat is for you. And then when they started backtracking and having second thoughts, when Marc was saying, "Oi, if I don't get the factory seat, I might leave." I mean, Martin really had no other option. There's no way that he could have just said, "You know what, don't worry, lads, I'll stay in Pramac for another year," because he would have completely undermined his own self, his own words. People would have questioned his ambition, perhaps, or are you really a top level rider if you're just happy to sit in a satellite team for the the best section of your career. So yeah, I think it's risky for Martin, but then I don't think he had any other option than to leave Ducati when they were edging towards putting Marc there.
Dave, I mean, Neil's hinted at some of the reasons there, but another big question, I think, is why has he left a bike that he's leading the championship on? I mean, he's probably not poor. I mean, he's a factory sort of back rider. Why jump ship?
I mean, the number I heard for his salary was 4 million, and they were offering Fabio, if the numbers are to be believed, 4 million. So you wouldn't think they would be getting a good deal more than that. Fabio. I mean, why? You would think that Martin would not be getting a good deal more than what was offered to Fabio, so maybe 5. But then Massimo Rivola did say I had to phone my boss to see if it was okay. So there was probably some numbers needed adjusting. But why is he leaving? It's quite simple. Pride. He has done everything. I mean, what more could he do to prove that he deserves a factory Ducati? I mean, just in terms of pure performance, pure numbers. I mean, obviously last year he was much better than Marc Marquez. He handily beat Enea Bastianini. He made Pecco Bagnaia's life hell. He made it very, very difficult for him to win the championship, even though, as far as Ducati are concerned, the right people ended up, or the right rider ended up winning the championship. He's leading the championship this year. He's improved since last year. He's a better rider than he was last year. What more could he do? Basically, it was clear that Ducati didn't. I mean, it's not that they didn't want him; they weren't prepared to do enough to keep him. And so it's just basic pride. He's going off to somewhere where he will be appreciated, because he is going to be. They're hiring him to win a champion, or to try to win a championship. Whether he can do it on Aprilia is a different question. I mean, I think the bike is going to be fine, but I'm not sure about the rest of the organisation around it.
I remember last year speaking to Paolo Ciabatti when he was still working as sporting director, and he told me that he was convinced from the first moment that Bastianini got chosen ahead of Martin for the 23 factory bike that Martin was going to be a championship challenger after that, because he has this sort of element where he felt slighted and he's a very proud character, and that was going to fuel them on. You just have to look at where he fell short last year. He didn't fall short because he lacked speed. It was because he was too proud. He was trying to show just how good he was to too great an extent. So I think you're definitely going to have a fully motivated Jorge Martin for the rest of this year and next year when he goes to Aprilia, just because he will want to show Ducati what they're missing out on, as he kind of has been for the last year and a half. But then I think you have to also look at Ducati, how they've handled this situation. Like, I guess it's not a total disaster because they have Marc Marquez alongside Pecco Bagnaia. That is a incredibly fast and strong factory team. But did no one think of sort of checking with Marc before they told Jorge, like, you've got the factory seat? Did no one really check with Marc to say, like, would he be okay if they just slotted in to Pramac, or did they just assume that it was all going to be A-okay? And this is maybe a situation where you think, like, the kind of deftness of like Paolo Ciabatti's touch is maybe missing somewhat from the kind of the organization at the moment. We know Mauro Grassilli has come in as Ciabatti's replacement, but I think, as he told us during the team launch at the start of the year, he's not really experienced in this kind of thing, and suddenly he's been thrown into this situation where he's dealing with massive egos, earning massive amounts of money with massive track experience, and he's the one that's kind of having to try and ease everyone's fears and tell everyone, look, we're thinking about you, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And it just seems like the weekend maybe wasn't handled in the right way. The kind of communication between all parties wasn't quite what it should have been.
Yeah, no, I mean, Mauro Grassilli was quite clearly thrown in at the very deepest of deep ends. He's basically thrown into the Marianas Trench rather than just the deep end of the swimming pool. But I mean, it was a difficult decision, and they have. It just seems that Ducati have handled it badly. I think it is good for. I mean, you make a good point, Neil, and I've said this all along. You know, the Jorge Martin is a really good satellite rider. He has a chip on his shoulder, and he needs that. He needs that extra. He needs to feel like the world is against him to be able to get even more out of himself. And I think going to Aprilia is going to act as a massive, massive, massive motivation.
We had a couple of comments from Patreons. Peter Kramer says that Jorge was clearly fed up. Janice Clayton as well remarks that Ducati could have handled this so much better. But as you both said, I mean, it was quite a unique situation to deal with. And even Jorge in the press conference in Mugello on Thursday said, you know, we have one of the greatest riders of all time, plus the guy who's leading the championship at the moment. I mean, it's a really, really, really particular situation to have to choose from. I mean, you could take the age into account. Marc is 31 or 32.
He's going to be 31 next year.
Yeah, and then you have Martin. 26. I think he's 31 already.
Yes, he is. Sorry.
So, you know, there's that. But then also, I don't know. I think from the bigger picture for MotoGP, I think it's fascinating to see a rider of Martin's current form and capabilities on a rival brand to the powerhouse in MotoGP. But also, I think it might say something towards the popularity of the riders. I mean, we were also talking about this recently on a podcast. Pedro Acosta seems to have an army of new fans and a surge of popularity in his home country. And obviously Marc has his own thing going on. Just look at the way that, you know, they've handled the news this morning on social media. Marquez's approach is far more dynamic, it's youthful, it's interesting compared to sort of Ducati's very sort of corporate approach. But there's those two things to consider.
Yeah, just two things briefly. I mean, the first about Martin going to Aprilia, I think it's great because next year you look at who should be challenging for the championship, and you've got obviously Marc and Pecco in the factory Ducati team. You've got Pedro over at KTM, which is a great story. And then you've got Martin at Aprilia, and, you know, big if here, but if Yamaha can start to make progress, you've also got a brilliant rider in Fabio Quartararo at Yamaha. That's a pretty decent spread of kind of the top talent, in MotoGP, spread across the different factories. And we're obviously going to come on to Enea Bastianini as well, who's going to be on his way out of the Ducati fold too. So, you know, Ducati are pretty top heavy with their talent at the moment. That the riders are first, second, third, and fourth in the championship. And I think next year is maybe going to be a bit more even, which is, I think, good for the series. And then just briefly what you were saying there, Ad, about marketability. I think someone, I can't remember who it was exactly, but someone on our Discord server made the really good point of how many Jorge Martin caps do you see in the grandstands when you go to races? And I mean, that's a valid question. I mean, I can't really remember seeing any Martin merch when I'm kind of walking around the track during a race weekend. And some reports, I think it was in Uri Puigdemont's report in motorsport.com on Monday, talking about how Claudio Domenicali, the CEO of Ducati, was edging towards Marquez just because he thought of the marketability more than other elements, because, you know, in terms of where they are on the track, they're pretty evenly matched. But when it comes to marketing potential, I mean, there's no contest between the two.
Yeah, just think of all the number 93 replicas that Ducati are going to sell. I mean, they're already selling lots and lots of very, very, very expensive bikes, which they're making an absolute fortune on. A sticker 93 on it, and that's another 10 grand right there.
Yeah, it's the superstar effect, isn't it? We see the same thing in football. Players being sold as much for their shirt selling capabilities as their abilities on the pitch. But as we mentioned earlier on, we've got a couple of clips from Massimo Rivola, so we're going to play those now. And I just want to give props to the Aprilia PR team, actually, because I think they really stepped things up this year in terms of providing sort of information and opportunities to the media. And they made this announcement very off the cuff on Monday at Mugello, but then they immediately made Massimo available to us to talk to and to get extra content out there. And also, when you look at Aleix Espargaro's announcement in Catalunya, you know, Aleix was also doing extra media work, and, you know, just getting access to be able to give people like our listeners and followers, decent depth and insight is an important thing. So I want to give props to sort of Antonio and Vicky there for the work they're doing. Anyway, here is Mr. Rivola on some of his first comments after signing the Jorge Martin contract.
Since Aleix decided to retire, we start speaking to everybody. The strategy was quite clear, not doing the first move, because we didn't want to do any gift to anyone. But when we felt that there was an opportunity, that it was actually last night, we were quite quick in let's say, making action rather than talk. So we found a deal very, very quickly. Last night I called my boss and I said, we have a chance, and he said, get it, go for it, and I did. So we have all the team of the finance, legal, guys that work during the night to make it done, and I don't know if it's based on emotion, but I like to think that the choice of Jorge is done because Aprilia did a consistent growth during the years. We are actually the only one that so far won races as alternative to his current bike. So it's another another item of the puzzle to fix it. Yeah. I remember when we had in 2020 the issue to find a rider, and it was very difficult to find a rider. And now I had a long list of managers knocking to my door, and that's for sure. It's the satisfaction of the company that work in a proper way. So far I take this as a well done, guys. You did. If we have this chance, it means that we did a good job. But it's not that okay. We have the rider to win because we already have Maverick to win races. Aleix won races, so it won't be enough for us. So we need to keep growing as a company first. Riders are part of the project. Obviously, are the one that everybody see what they do on track. But again, it's part of the puzzle. They are part of this big puzzle.
Guys, what does this mean for the rest of 2024? Dave, I think we were talking a bit about this on our notes podcast from Mugello that we did after Massimo had spoken to us. You can't imagine that Martin is going to be flavour of the factory anymore with Ducati, and of course he's leading the championship, and that's their number one priority. But he's leaving, so it's going to be an interesting scenario for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the way that it usually works is that if you choose to leave, then you immediately stop getting updates. However, if the factory chooses someone else over you, then they will sort of give you updates a little bit behind the schedule of the other factory rider. I mean, like quite obviously now, Pecco Bagnaia is going to get all of the good stuff. I suspect that Martin might still get one or two small things, but the focus is going to shift to Pecco Bagnaia for sure. Ducati now have no motivation to favour or to treat Martin and Bagnaia equally. Like Bagnaia. Clearly, it was always going to be a tricky proposition, what with him not being in the factory team. But now, he's going to be second choice for a lot of things. It doesn't mean they're not going to turn his revs down. They're not going to sort of start giving him sort of the shonky parts. So just stick a GP06 engine in the bike or anything like that. It is basically just the latest updates will go to the factory team. They will be given to the riders who to develop. You might see Morbidelli start to get a few more bits and bobs. You might also see Morbidelli start to get things to try for Pecco. So it does actually complicated the whole structure that Ducati have a little bit. But like I say, they're not going to slow Martin down, but they're certainly going to stop helping him go faster.
Neil, is it possible that the chip on the shoulder gets a bit wider? I mean, it also depends on things we see on track, but you'd have to imagine as well, with Jorge being such good friends with Aleix Espargaro, that he's going to be whispering in his ear about the things that are going on with Aprilia. I mean, you imagine he's going to be well informed before he gets on the bike in Valencia.
Yeah, is it possible for the chip to be any bigger, Ad? I'm not really too sure, to be honest. If there was, he would probably have to wear a cast around it. I would say, I mean, there's further motivation for the Martin fire for the rest of the year, just to show Ducati, look, you've made a mistake, and this is the decision that you should have made. That goes without saying. I agree with Dave. It's certainly not going to help his championship challenge in terms of getting the latest parts. We saw through last year Ducati were bringing updates through the year. I think it was in Austria where there was a new start device or an updated start device, which really helped him and Bagnaia in the closing races. And they were pretty good with bringing the updates to both Bagnaia and Martin at the same time. There was no kind of preference shown to either rider in that championship fight last year, whereas this year, I'm not sure it's going to be quite that way. You would say that Aleix has played a pretty big hand in this as well. Obviously, those two guys are great friends. Martin is pretty much, Aleix says sometimes, I don't really know whether he's my son or he's my little brother, but the kind of the relation is pretty close. So yeah, you would say that Jorge will have a full rundown, a full debrief of how things work there and what needs worked on, what needs changed before he tools up in Aprilia colours.
Marc Marquez, we are not surprised, guys. 2-year term agreed just before we started recording, and it was only a matter of when it was going to happen. I suspected that something might have been up because I was due to have an interview with Davide Tardozzi on Monday in Mugello, and that didn't happen. And I know he had another appointment cancelled as well. So imagine Ducati only 24 hours after a fantastic home Grand Prix victory were busy with other things. My first kind of question to both of you, of any opinion that you might have on this subject, is about the timing. I mean, the Martin, like Dave said, it was a little bit of a masterstroke by Aprilia just to sort of cut across the Ducati party by making that move. And then Ducati have followed up pretty quickly with the Marquez news. We now have almost 3 weeks before we form up again at Assen. There was probably time for Ducati to do some very cool kind of content around Marc and flash it up just before Assen. But maybe there was some sort of corporate reason that they had to announce this deal. I just wonder what you both thought on this.
Undoubtedly there was some reason, because in terms of timing, I think it's the worst possible choice. They've already had their thunder stolen by Aprilia. This week should have been the big story is, will Marc be on a factory Ducati? And it isn't. It's like, ooh, Jorge Martin to Aprilia. And who saw that coming? So there's that. There's also the thing, like, the moment that Martin signed for Aprilia, we knew it was going to be Marc. But they could have kept us hanging for a lot longer. They could have teased a few things. They could have leaked a little bit of, we're worried maybe he's talking to KTM. There's all these other options. It's really difficult to get a deal. It's all this. So we'll have to wait and see. You just keep on teasing little bits. And you could have kept that up for 2 or 3 weeks. And then when it did come, you would have been able to build up the momentum and build up the real sort of excitement, the doubt and just sort of have an orgasmic release of contract signing.
What a stirrer! It's like watching an episode of Mad Men.
Yes, of course, yes, that's exactly. Look, I don't do this for a living. I'm probably really crap at it, which is why they announced it immediately. But this is not how I would have done it. I would have built it up and built it up and built it up and waited for it and cast doubt on it. And then you really would have grabbed the headlines. The other thing is, like, we're all the entire world's press is buggered off. We're all off. I'm off to England next week. I think you're off to somewhere for a motocross race. You're probably the best person to be in a position to talk to someone from Ducati, because you might actually bump into Paolo Ciabatti at an MXGP. But apart from that, there's no chances to exploit this. There's no media opportunities, and you could have had months and months. You could have had like 3 weeks of speculation about what's going on with Marc, when's he going to sign, all the rest of it. And now you're going to get the next 2 or 3 days, lots of stories about Marc, and then it'll all be forgotten again.
A man that can make orchids and rider announcements sound as smutty as anything. If your talent knows in advance.
One does what one can. Well, one likes to stick to one's particular talents, shall we say, which is just pure old smut.
Or oddities. We're going to put it that way rather than talents.
That's why we get on so well.
Neil, just your thoughts on the timing of this? I mean, Dave's pretty much nailed it on the head there. But yeah, I mean, you can imagine now the next big news item for Ducati is really having Marc in the official colours, which is not going to happen until maybe Madonna di Campiglio at the beginning of 2025, which you would imagine will be probably busier now.
Will Grassini let him test the factory Ducati?
Cue months of speculation. Exactly. Yeah. But nothing really to add to that ad. I would say just that, I mean, the biggest, most successful rider on the grid signs for your factory team, and the best that you can offer up is a little Photoshop thing. It's not even Photoshop, it's just a picture of him in a Ducati shirt. I think it was not alone in wishing for something a bit more dynamic from Ducati, but I guess that's maybe just not their bag when it comes to rider announcements. But yeah, maybe it didn't quite, their announcement didn't quite fit the heft of the situation, I feel.
Well, listen, what are the consequences of this? I mean, how is it potentially going to disrupt the factory sort of team there and Pecco's kind of environment? Again, as we've mentioned on the podcast in the past, Marc had very much that superiority complex in Repsol Honda. Anybody that came into the team was having to share a garage with a team that was incredibly tight. Marc Marquez was Repsol Honda to all intent and purposes, and Bagnaia has formed a similar kind of structure or ethos, you could say, in red. There's also the subject of Ducati cash. I mean, you imagine Marc is not going to be cheap. So what does that mean for the prices of the bikes and their resources for the next 2 to 3 years while they start to develop the 850? That's something else you have to think about. Drink sponsors, you might think it's not such a big thing, but Monster Energy support the whole off-road program as well as the MotoGP. I'm not too sure if they're in Superbike as well. I think they are. I'm not sure, but you'd imagine that kind of company-wide agreement is perhaps bigger than Marc having a little Red Bull logo on his helmet. Yeah, of course it was done before because Pecco's been Monster for ages and Jack Miller was a Red Bull rider, but then that was unique rider agreements, whereas now Monster Energy is on the fairings of the Ducati team. They're a team sponsor, so that's something that has to be factored in. And there's all these little ripples that are coming up from the announcement of this deal.
Yeah, I mean, for me the question is, it opens so many questions. First of all, I don't think that Marc Marquez is going to be wanting an awful lot of money. What he wanted was to be in the factory team, to have a factory bike, to have factory support. His contract will be 100% focused on, I want this in terms of support. I want this in terms of all of these other things. Maybe also, look, I'm not asking for very much money, so I'm not going to do very much media for you. There'll be less of those sort of things. And he won't necessarily have to, basically. So, yeah, I think there are ways around that. The sponsorship thing, especially, I think the Red Bull versus Monster is a much, much bigger one. I think they will find a way to make room for some of the other sponsors, personal sponsors that Marc has. For example, Allianz, I'm fairly sure they can find a way to get that all worked out, unless the insurance deal is much, much bigger than we actually know about. All of these sort of details you won't really know until you actually go looking at people's shirts on starting on the 1st of January next year. So that one is tricky to say. But like I say, this wasn't about money. This is about Marc wanting to win championships. And he is 100% going to ruin the atmosphere in that team. I know Pecco has denied that he didn't want Marc in the team, but you wander around and chat to people, and that is very much not the impression that you get.
Yeah, I think Pecco, after the press conference on Thursday at Mugello, was doing a bit of an Italian debrief, and I was told that someone had asked him, have you had any say in this rider choice? Have you told Ducati whether you want Martin or Marc? And he said, I didn't say any names. All I said was, I don't want someone in here who could upset the current harmony of this team that we've built over the last 4 years, which is very obvious what that means. I think yes, he might not have stated it, but he certainly almost stated it, I think we could say.
Yeah. I can't imagine what he's referring to. I mean, it's a mystery.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic develops. I think Marc has been trying his best over the last couple of rounds to be respectful. Obviously, there's been a few flashpoints between him and Pecco this year already, but there's been a kind of mutual respect from what we can see. And, Marc certainly hasn't tried to really get under Pecco's skin. I mean, just wait until we go to Valencia and they're both still within a shot of winning the championship. But, I think that's probably an effort from him to try and show, like, look, I can be accommodating, I can play the game, factory and team first, et cetera, even though it's all a load of nonsense. And I think you just have to commend Marc, really, at the end of the day, just for his powers of everything, not just his powers on track, but how he kind of manages things off the track. He's been in Ducati for 6 months, less than 6 months, and he's already engineered a way for him to get himself into the factory team and to push out one of Ducati's best riders. It's quite remarkable just how he's managed to manage it all and get exactly what he has wanted.
Yeah, and there are sort of credible reports that this is not what Carmelo Espeleta wanted, because having the best rider on the best bike is not good for an exciting championship. Because, I mean, just based on what he's doing on an old bike and taking the fight to people on the new bike, you'd have to say there's a good chance that he just walks away with it. Pecco Bagnaia didn't want it. Ducati didn't really want it in this way. They wanted to have much more freedom to choose. They didn't want to lose Jorge Martin, and they've lost Jorge Martin, because otherwise they wouldn't have tried to put the Pramac Ducati deal together. Marc Marquez is the most powerful person in MotoGP at the moment, just because he is exceptional. To be honest, what I'm really looking forward to is not Marc versus Pecco, it's Marc versus Pedro.
In a recent media debrief, Marc said to us that he felt it took balls to do what he did. Not only did he cut away a lot of money from riding Honda, but took a satellite bike and a year-old bike. And, it might still prove to be the wrong choice when it comes to this year's championship. I mean, I think it's taken balls for what Jorge Martin has done as well, for reasons that we've mentioned already on the podcast. But guys, I think these sort of two titans together in the team for the next 2 years for the Ducati setup, I mean, that's really pretty big, right? I mean, since maybe Jorge Lorenzo entered Repsol Honda alongside Marc, I don't think there's been two riders of such clout and such results on their CV in recent times where you think, whoa, the battle for the championship doesn't begin with 20 other riders on the grid. It starts right away in that same garage.
Yeah, exactly. And as we know, the Lorenzo Marquez thing was a non-event because Jorge never adapted to the Honda, and it was his final year in Grand Prix. And after 6 or 7 races, he injured himself to such an extent that he was thinking about retirement. I think you would probably have to go back to Rossi and Lorenzo for the last time that you've had this kind of heft in one single garage, two great champions who rightly think that they should be the number one. And, look how the Lorenzo and Rossi thing played out going to mention it. What you did?
What I was going to say was, hang on 1 minute, next year, 2025, 10 years since what?
Exactly. You didn't say it, but we all know what you meant.
Yeah, exactly. It is. The 2025 is going to be the 2015 Memorial season. And I think like Lorenzo Rossi is a much better comparison because it's a good bike. I think this is more like Lorenzo and Rossi in 2008 or 2000. It was 2008 when Lorenzo joined. Only obviously he was a rookie in those years where there's a champion on a bike. There's someone coming in who the other person really doesn't want. It's clearly a winning package. It's a very, very competitive bike. There's going to be all sorts of strife. And I think if Pecco Bagnaia could put up a wall and get to switch to Bridgestones, he would.
Yeah, I think if Pecco thinks he has his work cut out this year, then just wait till the next 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and ultimately, Marc has what he wants, which is the latest spec technology from currently the best bike builder on MotoGP grids. So mission accomplished. Whether he wins the championship this year or not, he's going to be sitting pretty for the next two. Dave, we have, I'm directing this question to you because we have a Patreon user, Derek Cabrera, asks if he'll take any of his old Honda team with him to Ducati. Considering that HRC, I think they're also in a contract cycle when it comes to the rest of their staff. It's entirely possible that somebody like Santi Hernandez also goes to Ducati, right?
I think it's more likely that he'll keep Frankie Carchetti. Ducati do not like breaking people up. They don't like breaking teams up. The most likely scenario is that he takes Santi Hernandez. Not Santi Hernandez. That he takes Frankie Carchetti. That he takes his data guy. That he takes maybe a mechanic. There might be a mechanic that comes over, but it won't be very many. Santi Hernandez is not going to come. It seems extremely unlikely that he'll come to Ducati. Mark knows exactly how much power he has and exactly when to use it and what to use it on. He knows that Frankie's good because Frankie has given him a bike that he's been able to be competitive on. He knows that the Ducati engineers around him are good because, they've got him to this far. The only thing that he cares about is winning. He can still be friends with Santi without without him being his crew chief. So I think that look, maybe a mechanic does come over, but that'll literally be it. There won't be very much. I think that also because Ducati have worked to put all of these people together, and it's a very Italian team, and they like their Italian engineers. So I think it's going to be full of Italian mechanics rather than importing a lot of Spaniards.
So Martin is outgoing, Marc is more incoming. What does this mean for the rest of the Ducati structure? Does this open the door to Pramac going ultimately to Yamaha because they're losing their star rider? If they want to continue a Franco Morbidelli, then you'd imagine that he's not going to want to get back on an M1. But then again, he probably doesn't have much other choice. Neil, what are your kind of first impressions when you consider sort of the fallout from all of these movements, not just for the rest of this year, but of course the years coming up?
Yeah, I think it looks as though this was the event that pushed Pramac definitively towards Yamaha. I wasn't at the post-race test at Mugello, but I heard from some people there that was what was being spoken of. And Pramac, without having a Martin, without having a Marquez, I guess you think, well, what's the point really? We may as well try something else. If you don't have a rider of that ilk competing in your colors, then yeah, you're going to look at Yamaha and think like, look, these guys are offering to pay us to use their machinery next year, and it's going to be full factory, something different. Ducati, I think, have been playing a bit of hardball with some of their stances and how much money they are asking for and so on. So we've been led to believe. So yeah, it does look as though Pramac are going to go to Yamaha next year, which would be, I think, pretty good for the grid overall, because let's face it, there are too many Ducatis on the grid at the moment, and it's not great when one manufacturer is packing 6 or 7 bikes into the top 10. We need a bit more variety there, and I think this is perfect for Yamaha, and hopefully should, aid their quest to come back up to the top.
Dave, we'll talk a little bit about where the riders can move around, because like the cards or the dominoes are falling very much. Goodness, we've had almost 3 riders in 1 week. But, does this potentially gut Gresini, for example? They're having a flagship season this year. Perhaps Marc hasn't won the amount of races that Bastianini did in 21. Yet. So, that still has to happen, or 2022 rather. 21. I can't remember. 22. Yeah. So, it's not quite reaching that sort of CV in terms of achievement, but, I think the eyes are on now VR46, and I think they've confirmed to be running GP equipment next year, right? It's not official, but they've confirmed, and then Gresini as well. So just any thoughts on, what potentially can happen with those teams?
Yeah, if Pramac leave, which I think they will and they should, I think it's going to be fantastic for MotoGP. It's just what Yamaha needs and what MotoGP needs, and I think the Yamaha next year is going to be a much better bike. Then VR46 are next in line. They would get the GP25s. That means 2 things. Firstly, it means that they get Fermin Aldeguer whether they like it or not, because Ducati need to be able to put the bike somewhere, and one of the or put the rider they've signed somewhere. And one of the conditions of having the factory equipment is that you no longer necessarily get a say over which riders you're going to sign. So I think that happens. Gresini knew exactly what they were getting. What they were getting was a chance to really raise their profile. They're milking Marc for as much as they could. They've got this little thing of sort of movie-related PR boast stuff going along. I mean, it's nice to see them using it. I mean, it's not for me. That's fine. I know a lot of people do like it, and I really like the way that it's been put together. It's very clever. It's just not my cup of tea. But they are absolutely trying to milk this, and they will try and build on top of that, and also see what they can get. They, as far as I know, I believe they have a contract for next year, but I'm not sure for Ducati. So yeah, they're going to stay where they are. And also they've also raised their profile in the rider market, because they can say, look, you saw it with Bastianini, you saw it with Marc Marquez, Alex Marquez has had some good results. Fabio Di Giannantonio has won races. This is a good team. You should come and ride for us. Maybe we'll surprise you. So yeah, it's definitely good for them, and they need to build on it. So we'll see how that works out in the future.
Enea Bastianini is now in contract limbo, but there's been a lot of connections between him and the Piro Mobility Group. He'll be riding factory machinery in the Tech 3 setup. We know Pedro Acosta, of course, that announcement was made in Mugello that he'll be 2 years in Orange, alongside Brad Binder, who's already got a contract in place as well for Red Bull KTM. So that those places are full. So, what about this, guys? Is that a good move for Enea? And, do we think it's true? It seems the most logical choice, right? Because he's again, like you were saying about Martin, it's there's not a great deal on the table that's acceptable.
Well, Carlo Panat was on Italian radio the other night saying that it was true. So I think we have to accept that it is true. It is the factory. Seat. Also, it was the only thing that was really available to him. There was talk that he could have gone to Aprilia, but if you can choose between Bastianini and Martin, I think you choose Martin, because he's proven to be a much more. Bastianini can win races. He's shown that. Jorge Martin can fight for championships, and he's shown that. And I think that is what Aprilia want to do at the moment. About KTM, it also looks like there might have been an offer on the table for Jorge Martin at KTM, but again, he would have gone into the Tech 3 squad, because you don't move out Brad Binder for Jorge Martin. If Marc Marquez had been available, you might have moved Brad Binder out for Marc Marquez, because you know what you're getting with Marquez. But Martin, it hasn't, unless he came with the number 1 plate, then maybe you would stick him in the factory team. But Martin has made his choices. I don't know whether it's a good choice. I'm not sure how similar the KTM is to the Ducati. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, you certainly saw that Jack took to the bike like a duck to water at first, but he's been struggling recently. So let's see what Bastianini can do with it.
Yeah, and by the sounds of things, it might be that Bastianini's in Orange as well, because one or two things that I heard from the Mugello test was maybe to try and make the Tech 3 seats more appealing. It's going to be more of a factory KTM 2 squad rather than, Tech 3 gas squad like this year, where there's a clear difference. They're trying to make it look as though it's 4 bikes, 2 teams, but 4 bikes pretty much from the factory. And I think that's maybe one of the ways that they've been able to lure Bastianini across from that promise, from what I heard at Mugello. And yeah, I think it's a great signing for KTM. Risky for Bastianini, like Martini's leaving the best bike, but yeah, they're getting a rider that is so fast and multiple MotoGP race winner. Should be another rider that can they can gauge just where they're at the moment, because he's coming from the best bike, and seeing how he gets on will kind of be a good barometer for them to see how they're doing.
Neil, 2 questions for you. Should Enea feel slighted by this? Of course he would had an injury-ravaged season last year, but then he showed his true class again at Mugello and his potential. We said on the note shows across the Italian Grand Prix that, you know, he maybe dropped a bollock by his behavior or his actions in Catalunya. That might have been, ironically, the sort of the nail in his contract coffin with Ducati. And the other thing is, as we had like a Patreon user, Tim Kendall, asking us, where could Jack end up? Who joins him? I mean, who takes that last Austrian bike?
I mean, Enea is a MotoGP rider, so of course he's going to feel slighted, because that is basically the job of MotoGP riders whenever things do not go exactly their way. I don't think he can have many complaints, to be honest. I know he's been very unlucky, but then the fact of the matter is that you look at the championship this year, he's fourth in the championship, and two of the riders that are ahead of them are the two riders that were involved in that fight for his seat. So yes, he'll feel slighted, but I don't think he has a great deal of reason to. And yeah, the second question, who will be his teammate if he is in Tech 3? I mean, it sort of depends, I think, on whether Jack Miller is entirely open to staying there. He said, I think on Thursday, that that he was ready to move across to Tech 3, and he could have no real complaints of Pedro taking his seat in the factory team. But you know, there do appear to be rumors that persistently link Miller to Honda, for example. You know, and if he can get a seat in Honda's factory team in Repsol to replace Joan Mir, then maybe he goes there. So in that case, I think you said, Ad, that Nico Goyon, Tech 3 manager, said they were speaking to Moto2 riders. So then you think about maybe Joe Roberts.
Okay. Guys, head to Fly Racing for some great products, both for the road and, of course, off-road, where items like the Fly Formula S helmet is of some of the best and safest tech on the market inside that lid. Good stuff. It ventilates really well. It's really comfortable. I use a version when I'm riding off-road. I wouldn't wear anything else, to be honest. Browse flyracing.com for decent priced and high-quality goods. We've got a couple more subjects now with the repercussions of these 2.5 moves, if you like. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the listener questions we've had through, guys. So the first thing we should rapid fire across, you know, the subjects we have on the list. There's going to be one seat left in sort of the factory Aprilia team. Who do we think gets it? Does Maverick stay or does somebody else come in?
I think that Maverick leaves. There's talk that he's he's also talking to Honda. He's not giving the impression of someone who really wants to say. So I think he leaves, and I think that it could be either Bezzecchi or Bastianini. But I think that Bezzecchi will get the call. So, sorry, Digia. Yes, I think it'll be Bezzecchi or Digia. Di Gianantonio has been really very good. He's basically the second best rider on a GP23 at the moment. So maybe Ducati want to keep it. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be one of those two. And I would say that Bezzecchi possibly, because Bezzecchi is probably slightly better marketing value.
Who fills the Trackhouse saddles? Neil?
It's tough to know. I mean, they've got, you know, do they keep one of the two riders, either Raul or Miguel? I wouldn't say Miguel has done really a great deal this year to suggest that, you know, he should. Raul has shown flashes, obviously, in Barcelona. I think Joe Roberts has been persistently linked, but then Massimo Rivola said on Monday that he didn't think that was likely. Joan Mir, I think, seems like a pretty decent choice, decent shout. He confirmed that he wasn't going to retire next year at the Mugello test, and you know, that whole Brivio link up would kind of make sense, I think, from a logical point of view. So yeah, maybe you would have Mir with one of their current existing riders as well staying.
I think I don't think you can rule out Jack Miller as well, purely because of the experience he brings now. I mean, he's brought sort of Ducati insight towards KTM, and then obviously moving to Aprilia would be an interesting avenue for them to learn about what, you know, goes on inside Austria as well now. Dave, who would be the other HRC rider? Because Joan Mir's debrief to us on Monday in Mugello was quite revealing.
It was actually quite. I felt sorry for HRC PR Harry Lloyd as he sat there while Joan just basically slagged the entire thing off.
I think one comment was, "Is there any rider that's done better once they've
Oh yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. No one has left Honda better than when they came in, which is not exactly encouraging. I mean, if I were HRC, what I would do is move Zarco up and then give someone else the LCR seat. But I'm not entirely sure how much freedom they have to do that. We do know that there's a lot of riders who are interested in that seat, but it's purely from a financial aspect because Honda are in a deep hole, and the only way they can get riders is to draw up big numbers and put them on checks and hand them over, no questions asked. They are very much in the begging mode sort of thing in terms of riders, rather than the picking and choosing riders. We will allow you to ride our motorcycle, which is where Ducati basically are. So I honestly have no idea. It could be Maverick, could be Jack, could be anyone who needs the money really, and who's willing to sacrifice themselves on the altar of HRC.
Neil, Alex Rins is still hobbling from that injury he picked up in Mugello over a year ago now. Is there a chance he could possibly knock it on the head also? Who would go to Yamaha in that case? Just a bit of speculation on your part.
Yeah, it's a good question, Ad. I mean, Rins just has a 1-year deal with Yamaha this year, and there have been rumours that he has been contemplating retirement. I heard this first of all at the end of last year, when I think it was maybe being downplayed just how bad and serious that leg injury that he suffered last year was/is. He's still hobbling about. He, I think, has been considering, whether it's worthwhile continuing. Rins has made a lot of money in his career from his days at Suzuki. But I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a big if. And if he does retire, I mean, then that's another seat that's opened up to riders like Mir or riders like Oliveira, or so it's quite interesting. Yeah, but I mean, if I had to bet my money on it now, I would say that Rins sticks around.
And it's an attractive seat as well because it's clear that the bike is making progress and there's a lot of happening at Yamaha. And if they get a satellite team as well, then it really becomes an attractive proposition.
Last thing, which rider move would you both love to see? I mean, if there's something, even if it's entering the realms of fantasy, what would you like to see come off? I mean, for me, I'd like to see maybe Joan Mir ride the other Gas. I think, he's one of these riders at the moment. There's a little clutch of them that need to revive their career. And I think Bezecchi's in the same situation. His sort of choice of staying on with the team and with that package is not really paying off so far. But why not Mir to go sort of orange or /red?
I would like to. Well, I mean, what I would like to see is Marc Marquez on the KTM, but that's not going to happen because he's already signed for Ducati. But I mean, I would quite like to see Mir on a Yamaha. I think that would be interesting. It would also be very interesting to see him taking the place of Alex Rins if Alex Rins were to retire. It would also be interesting to see Oliveira on a Yamaha, but I think Oliveira has been moved around too much. He spent too many. He hasn't had the kind of stability that he really needs. Apart from that, I mean, like in Moto2, like Joe Roberts, you really want to see him in MotoGP because I think he absolutely deserves a seat in MotoGP. I'm not sure how well he will. He's not going to make the same impact as Pedro Acosta, but he is going to be, a perfectly competent MotoGP rider. So, but I think a lot of the excitement has already happened.
Yeah, we'll go along with that. I think it would be good to see Roberts up there maybe in Tech 3, maybe in Trackhouse, maybe in the Pramac team when it goes across to Yamaha. I think those are all attractive seats where, he could show some talent.
We reached that stage of the show where one person on this call can have a big smile and get very smug and feel very happy with himself, although perhaps not so much this week. It's the Alpinestars Paddock Pass Podcast Fantasy League update time. Dave, how happy are you?
I mean, I will own up to it being more luck than judgment, and I really should have boosted Pecco Bagnaia. I'm such an idiot for not doing it, but I am still ahead. I did drop a bunch of places, so that's not great. But Yeah, and I've now got to try and find a way to engineer a way to get Marc Marquez in my team without losing Paco Bagnaia. So that's going to be tricky. Also, I dropped I still can't believe I dropped Franco Morbidelli from my team for Alex Rins. That is the world's most boneheaded move.
Neil, how was your weekend?
I thought it was a good weekend, but there I am, 968th, still furrowing
68.
my own little
Oh,
path
I'm
all the way down there.
975th.
Yeah,
How's that
but
possible?
there are 1,216 players in our league currently, so it's kind of slightly reassuring to know that a quarter of them are behind me. So it doesn't sound great, but when I say that I'm just 3/4 bad, then that's not so damaging.
Who was the rider that hit your team the hardest in the weekend?
I had a good lineup. I had a good weekend. I had Mark and Pecco, and then I had Pedro and Franco. And Franco actually had a decent weekend for a change, so it was solid overall. What hit me was choosing Yamaha as my team because it looked like they were going to be great on Friday, and then they had a stinker of a weekend. So that was what let me down.
Yeah, I mean, I had Pecco, Maverick as gold riders. Sometimes you can't change these things so much purely because of the economics. Whereas I have Pedro, and I stuck with Digia, who, like you said earlier, Dave, is having a pretty decent season. But my constructor KTM and then Tech 3 as the team, because I have to make this thing fit, is not really paying off. And like I'm 7 places behind you, Neil, so I'm going to be working overtime, double hard, studying the stats, because those 7 places out of 1,000, 1,200, my friend, that's not like a comfortable margin for you. So watch out, because I'm coming.
Well, this is the first time that I've not been the last in our mini competition between the 4 of us. So Dave and Steve, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted that Steve is not on the show this week. So great. Stay in a hedge somewhere, Steve. Listen, we've got a couple of rapid listener questions to get through before we wrap up this show. Neil, over to you first. Adam Pierce asks, why was Moto2 shortened so much?
Well, there was a red flag in the Moto3 race, and that was obviously that delayed things and meant that Moto3 finished up a little bit later than it should have done. As we know, TV is kind of king in MotoGP race.
Sacred. It's not kind of king. It is absolutely everything.
It's everything, yeah. And they want to have their full R build up of MotoGP. And basically, I think, the Moto2 and Moto3 guys have learned in the last couple of years that, they're very much some way down the pecking order when it comes to the importance of where they stand. They didn't want to have Moto3 finishing too late, which would then impact on the kind of build up to the MotoGP race, and therefore it was shortened. We've seen this a few times before. I think in the past, I seem to remember the Argentina Moto2 race last year was shortened to about 12 or 13 laps, and quite a few riders were coming out saying it's an awful long way to fly and travel just to do 12 laps of racing on the Sunday. So yeah, similar situation here, I think.
Dave, you got 30 seconds to sum up John Erickson's question about the validity of Yamaha's test program.
I think it's much better this year than it was last year. They're actually going out and doing a lot more riding. So much so that Fabio Quartararo was starting to worry about sort of like his fitness. He's starting to say it was quite a lot, even though he desperately wants to do it. So they are doing it more and more, but they really need either a second test team. Also because Cal Crutchlow is currently recovering from surgery, which is a bit of a blow. They have some Japanese test riders, but that's basically for durability. They really need another test rider, and I'm quite surprised they didn't try to snag Aleix Espargaro, because I think he would have been a fantastic fit.
Neil, your 30 seconds comes to ask a question from Matonj, who asks, what's up with Arbolino? And observes that riders usually need 2 to 3 years in Moto2 to be able to make the step. So thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good question. Tony has been, it's been a torrid year. This time a year ago, he was, I think, still leading the Moto2 World Championship and widely tipped to be stepping up to MotoGP this year. But he currently sits 13th. He's had a best finish of 7th. He's only had 3 top 10s from 7 races. And he just hasn't been able to find any kind of confidence with the front end of his bike this year, now that they've switched to Pirelli tyres. Get the impression that he's starting to lose a bit of patience with the situation. They've been making a lot of changes to the bike. It looked as though he'd made a big step forward after the Jerez test, but the last couple of results have been shocking. And one of the weird things is that last year we saw Tony was pretty much the king of the starts and king of the first couple of corners. He had this tremendous ability to qualify badly, but then exit the first turn 5, 6, 7, or 8 positions ahead of where he qualified. That just hasn't been the case this year, and I guess that shows just how much confidence is lacking currently. So, tough times for Robert, and I was really expecting by this stage of the season for him to have worked it out and to have come to a sort of a setting that would help him ride the way he wishes. But it's kind of tough seeing a rider of that quality down so low in the championship.
Yeah, it's been interesting seeing the riders who've really struggled with the Pirellis, because there's been a few surprises in there that people you were expecting to come and just haven't sort of turned up, and Arbolino is definitely among them.
Okay, VJ, maybe over to you again, Neil. Considering you've got a bit of a bonhomie with Franco Morbidelli and his whole vibe, is he coming back to his best?
I'll take that as a compliment, Ad, because I like to think that I have a similar laid-back nature to Franco. I would say he's coming back to his best. It was a good weekend, wasn't it, for Frankie? He was, 4th in the sprint, 6th. Oh, no, maybe was he 6th in the race? I really should have... he was 6th in the race, yes, exactly. So 4th and 6th, pretty decent. And it does show that he's kind of getting back towards some kind of proper form. He had a much better start on Sunday as well, which is an area that has been letting him down. I think the unfortunate matter of fact for Franco is that he's going to be judged by the other riders on that bike this year. And the other riders on that bike were 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So, 6th is great, and it's a big step forward, but it's still some way off what the other guys on that same machine are doing. And I know there's lots of extenuating circumstances, but it's the reality of the situation. He was nearly 10 seconds off the victor. So, he's definitely... I think operating now at a much better level than he was at any stage since the start of 2021, pre-knee injury. But I don't think it's quite enough.
Neil Roberts, another Neil, probably more attractive. I don't know. We have yet to see a photo. Wonders which Moto3 rider will be the first to have a taste of the 850s.
Easy. Too easy.
David. You imagine in that trajectory, right? I mean, he's been jumping out of Moto3 this year. Give him 2 years in Moto2. On the current rate he's going, he's going to be the Pedro Acosta for 2027. Anybody else, guys, apart from Alonso?
I mean, Colin. I'm going to say Colin just out of sheer prejudice.
That's
right. Proud nationalism. But generally, I think what we saw in Mugello was, there are clearly they are clearly the 2 best riders in Moto3 right now. I had a long chat with Colin after the Moto3 press conference, which obviously I went to because he was on the podium. And he's just very smart, very down to earth, and all the rest of it. I think he was on Dutch TV at the presentation of the Dutch TT at Assen the other night, and he was asked, you thinking about MotoGP? He says, obviously, of course you're thinking about it, but just focused on winning now. He's incredibly, he brushes off all of these questions with great aplomb. He's so grounded. He's taking root almost. So I have high hopes for him. Alonso is clearly an exceptional talent, and I think he's on a really fast trajectory. But I think right now that Colin is the second best rider in Moto3, and to be the second best rider in Moto3 behind David Alonso is incredibly impressive. And he's really taken the fight to Alonso. Like Alonso otherwise would just be walking away the way that Pedro Acosta did, I think.
Considering your propensity for shit stirring and chaos loving, Dave, the last question comes to you from TV Room Raccoon. He wonders how Marc will be received in Italy next year. Thoughts?
The same way he's been received now. Also, very much looking forward to Marc Marquez sharing a garage with Valentino Rossi's great protege, and Valentino popping into the Ducati garage. The crack is going to be mighty. I'm sure they'll get together over a beer and put the past behind them. Let bygones be good bygones, and be besties.
Well, that's it for this week. Guys, any final thoughts at all? I've been using that word a lot on this podcast, but I guess it's important to get these opinions out while we've got hot news on the plate. Anything else to wrap up?
Well, if you haven't placed your bet on Marc Marquez being the 2025 and 2026 MotoGP champion, I suggest you hurry up, because the odds are just going to be absolutely terrible by the time in about 3 weeks' time.
Also, if you've been listening to the show or watching on YouTube, our sympathies, of course, as always, for viewers. Then
at least they don't have to look at bins, eh? At least they don't have to look at bins this time.
Then don't forget to send us any comments, nice ones, not stupid ones. And of course, we'll react to them. Any suggestions also for the show, anything you'd like to see or hear, let us know, because we do reply to our listeners and our followers, as we mentioned on Discord as well. So get on Patreon, because that's all growing and it's really cool. It's a good laugh around the Grand Prix weekends, just being able to answer questions and take part in some bench racing. Other than that, we'll be back next week. We've got a couple of interviews to fill the void until we get to Assen, that fine circuit, TT circuit, Assen, in the Drenthe. You know, Assen, the famous course circuit. Assen, the first track that was, part of the first World Championship 75 years ago.
First of all, it's called Drenthe, not Drenthe. And second of all, I think you seem to have forgotten its correct name, which is the Cathedral of Speed.
Oh, I love this part.
Cathédrale de la Vélocité.
I love this part of the season so much.
We're going to have to get you a special robe, aren't we? Kit you out as though you're going to church to go to like a kind of mass ceremony. Yeah,
exactly.
Fancy dress.
Just a quick note. Steve has been busy over in the island during TT week. I think he's got exclusive interviews with Peter Hickman, Davy Todd, John McGuinness, and Dean Harrison, and they're all available to Patreon listeners currently. And as Ad says, we'll be filling our Patreon with other exclusive content in the coming weeks.
Thanks to KTM, Fly Racing, and Renthal. We'll be back next week.